Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stephen Matty. I'm Chair of the Standards and Ethics Committee. The committee is now returning to open session to make public the outcome of today's votes. Today, the Committee on Standards and Ethics found the charges against Councilmember King to have been substantiated and is recommending sanctions and corrective actions to the full council. As you may recall, the four charges were retaliation under the council's EEO policy, disorderly conduct, conflict of interest in violation of council rules and the city charter, and harassment under the council's EEO policy. Under the city charter, the council is the judge of the qualifications and conduct of its own members, and pursuant to council rules, the Standards and Ethics Committee may find that a member has engaged in disorderly conduct, and upon adoption of a report outlining its evidence, may recommend sanctions to the full council. The committee voted today to transmit the report to Councilmember King's attorneys to the full council later today. Please note that the report will also be made publicly available by close of business tomorrow. The committee also voted today to authorize staff to make any and all appropriate referrals of this matter. We expect the full council to meet to consider our findings and recommended sanctions early next week. We do not take this duty lightly, and this is a very serious matter. I have to start by noting that this is Councilmember King's second substantiated complaint before the committee. In 2017, Councilmember King was found to have violated the council's EEO policy and required to complete mandatory training. Less than 2 years later, we received the communication from the city's Department of Citywide Administrative Services that a former staffer of Councilmember King had been denied unemployment benefits by the Department of Labor and had appealed that denial by claiming that the staffer had been constructively fired due to gender-based harassment on the part of Councilmember King. It was this finding by a state agency that led to the current investigation. We began the subject investigation into these allegations in March of 2019. Although the committee was ultimately unable to fully investigate the gender-based harassment allegations made by the former council staffer, in part because the staffer at some point declined to participate further in the investigation. During interviews, allegation after allegation and problem after problem surfaced in the functioning of Councilmember King's office. Perhaps one of the most disturbing allegations, which the committee found substantiated, was that in 2017, Councilmember King, in an effort to obstruct the first investigation in 2017, held a staff meeting in his home where he identified the 2017 complainant by name and disparaged the complainant to his entire staff. This is behavior that cannot be tolerated. The evidence also clearly demonstrated that with regard to the current investigation, Councilmember King repeatedly intimidated and punished staff who he had thought or would cooperate with the committee's investigation. He demanded that staffers who had cooperated with us admit their cooperation to him. Of the 3 staffers who admitted they had cooperated, one was driven out of his office, he attempted to fire another, and the third must have clearly gotten the message because even a subpoena wasn't enough to compel that staffer's cooperation. In addition, he attempted to fire another staffer who had witnessed much of this conduct and who ultimately testified at our hearing. The evidence also clearly demonstrated that Councilmember King allowed his office to become unsafe and disorderly by condoning the conduct of a supervisor who repeatedly physically threatened persons in the office. It is also clear that Councilmember King facilitated numerous conflicts of interest in the office that benefit both himself and his wife. All of this will be outlined in our report to the council. The truth is, were it not for Councilmember King's behavior during the pendency of this investigation, we would probably not be discussing sanctions of the magnitude contained in our recommendations, including but not limited to a suspension, a significant monetary penalty, removal from all committee assignments, and a permanent monitor in his office for the duration of his term. Councilmember King was aware of the investigation into his conduct from the time the committee opened it on March 13, 2019. He was offered the opportunity to engage with the committee and was also advised to retain counsel to protect his interests during such engagement. However, and from the outset, the council member adamantly refused to cooperate. He refused many overtures from both the committee and the special counsel and never once appeared for an interview with either committee investigators or the special counsel, except for one brief conversation to defend a supervisor in his office accused of threatening and intimidating behavior. During that conversation, he never once denied that any of that supervisor's behavior had occurred and in fact seemed to condone it. Indeed, instead of cooperating, Councilmember King attempted to make a mockery of this committee and the council's rules and policies. His attorneys are arguing that he did not have enough time to adequately respond to the charges against him. Well, the original charges were filed and sent to him on August 21st, and the hearing began on September 13th. That is over 3 weeks. The reason there were superseding charges filed on September 4th was that instead of preparing for the hearing, Councilmember King appears to have spent that period suspending or attempting to fire his staffers who were cooperating or potentially could cooperate with our investigation. While the committee certainly would have been inclined under normal circumstances to consider a reasonable adjournment, we were not going to give Councilmember King more time to hurt staffers who had done nothing more than carry out their obligations to the council to cooperate, and we were not going to let him undermine this committee's and the council's authority and obligation to judge the conduct of its members. We followed the committee's disciplinary procedures and provided Councilmember King's attorneys with copies. We held a hearing in which the committee heard from witnesses and provided Councilmember King the opportunity to present his own witnesses and evidence. Councilmember King failed to appear at the hearing, and his attorneys only appeared to object to the very fact that a hearing was taking place. They then got up and left. The witnesses were credible and damning. In general, they supported each other's testimony, and there were documents that also supported many of the charges. The committee was unanimous in its determination that the 4 charges had been substantiated by a preponderance of the evidence. Finally, I would like to reiterate that a redacted copy of the committee's full report will be made publicly available tomorrow after its transmission to the council members. This report will contain the proposed recommended sanctions as well. We are timing the public release of the report to allow members to fully review our findings and recommended sanctions. As stated earlier, we expect the full council to meet to consider our report and recommended sanctions early next week. Thank you all for your time, and we're adjourning the meeting. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Vallone, proud to be chair of this committee, so welcome this morning. And I want to thank everyone for being such great partners on having our first hearing on tourism. So we're going to hold annual hearings specifically on the tourism industry and give a chance for our partners like New York & Company with Fred Dixon to give us an annual report of where we are today in comparison to years past and what our vision is for the future. And I always like to see the different aspects of the industry, and by moving the committee to do that, we were able to have a different experience, and we're able to bring the council members into the heart of some of these issues we're going to talk about today. And that's what today's hearing is about, and what the bill is about creating an office which can help coordinate that interagency coordination between any city agency that impacts the tourism industry. So in 1998, around 33 million people came to visit New York City, and by 2018, that number is nearly doubled to 65.1 million people. So just in 20 years, the city has witnessed an astounding near 100% increase in the number of visitors. The massive influx of tourists is a testament to the lure of the city's abundance of attractions, iconic skyscrapers, Broadway shows, museums, galleries, restaurants, and other cultural institutions. Much of the city's data in these areas is collected by New York City & Company, whose mission is to promote New York's travel and tourism opportunities not only here but around the entire world. The tremendous work being done by New York City & Company towards promoting the city's tourist economy is clearly evident by the success in the industry we enjoy today. We believe more can be done by the administration to streamline and standardize the tourist experience here in the city once our tourists arrive. So more importantly, coordinate that interagency communication and involvement on any project that can impact the tourism agency and our tourists, whether it's the creation of a bike lane, pedestrian plaza, department of buildings, Verizon Con Ed projects, park departments, quality of life issues, public safety, or any related project. There is simply more we can do. The business and tourists alike have asked for the office to be created to oversee and coordinate these concerns instead of simply calling 311. While the committee recognizes the importance of tourism dollars to the city economy, it seems the administration takes a different approach. In Mayor de Blasio's New York work plans to create 100,000 jobs across 5 sectors in 10 years, tourism is not even listed as a sector of the city's economy, and jobs in tourism are not counted as distinct from other industries. The administration argues that the food services and hospitality sectors account for many tourist-facing jobs, but jobs could just as easily cater to city residents. For these reasons, and the ones we've discussed before, I've introduced legislation before the committee, Intro 1774, which would establish the Office of Interagency Tourism Affairs, which would receive public comments related to tourism and facilitate communication between city agencies on tourism-related industries. Since most city agencies are usually busy conducting their primary responsibilities, tourism-related business and concerns are often lost in the shuffle. We believe the creation of this office will simplify and standardize everyday long-term concerns that face us here in the city.
I am Samara Karasik, Chief Policy Officer at the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce. The Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce is among the largest and most influential business advocacy organizations in New York, having spent the last 100 years developing and promoting policies that drive economic development and advance its member interests. Over the last number of years, we have played a central role in Brooklyn's tourism economy, convening local institutions and businesses to bring Brooklyn to the forefront of tourism marketing in New York. We have brought groups of hotels and businesses to the International Powwow Tourism Conference annually. We've developed visitor trail guides to chocolate, beer, wine, and distilleries in our borough, and launched our first ever Brooklyn Passport in 2018, a digital photo guide of 100 things to do and see in the borough. In 2018, a record 65 million people visited New York City, making it one of the most popular cities to visit in the United States. Many of these visitors flocked to Brooklyn to experience our wonderful cultural institutions, such as the Brooklyn Museum, Brooklyn Academy of Music, and Brooklyn Botanic Gardens. People come here to experience our beautiful parks, from Brooklyn Bridge Park to Prospect Park and Coney Island. Brooklyn is also home to major concert and sporting event spaces with Barclays Center, King's Theater, and MCU Stadium. Tourists also know Brooklyn as a culinary destination. These visitors patronize our fantastic restaurants, shop at our local stores, and rest their heads at one of our 2,100 hotels. Aside from the revenue that tourism creates, this key industry creates local jobs, with 17% of all Brooklyn employment represented by hospitality and retail jobs. It is crucial that the city continue to build on the strong work of New York City and Company and its local partners to bolster the tourism economy, specifically in the outer boroughs. We look forward to continuing to work with the City Council on this issue.
So thank you. With that, we close our committee's hearing.
My name is Councilmember Antonio Reynoso. Welcome to this oversight hearing about the Department of Sanitation's 2019-2020 draft snow plans. Local Law 28 of 2011 requires DSNY to submit to the council a snow plowing and removal plan for each borough, and to make those plans available to the public on the city's website. This hearing will examine the draft snow plans that the council received from DSNYs pursuant to Local Law 28 and the city's readiness for the upcoming snow season. We also look forward to hearing from DSNY's lessons learned from the management of the last November 15th 6-inch snowfall known as Winter Storm Avery. Despite its relatively small amount of snow, this storm significantly impacted the lives of New Yorkers. Many were stuck in traffic for many hours, and some children were stuck on school buses for more than 10 hours without updates to their parents about their whereabouts or their safety. New Yorkers should not have to go through this again, and I hope to understand from DSNY what adjustments have been made to respond to future storms of this nature. We're also hearing today intro number 1228, sponsored by Councilmember Danny Drum, which would create an affirmative defense for certain sanitation violations during declared emergencies and certain severe weather conditions.
Thank you very much, Chair Reynoso, for hearing Intro 228 today. This legislation addresses an ongoing injustice by reforming how the Department of Sanitation issues violations in the aftermath of natural and man-made disasters. No one should be penalized by the city for following the city's own instructions. Yet that is exactly what is happening when the Department of Sanitation issues violations during declared emergencies. During one period of extreme cold, the mayor told older New Yorkers that they should stay inside. One of my constituents, an 86-year-old woman living alone, took heed of this directive. To her chagrin, she subsequently received a notice of violation for garbage on her sidewalk during the emergency. Senior citizens and the disabled are especially vulnerable to this treacherous practice, and that is why it has to end as soon as possible.
Good afternoon, Chair Reynoso and members of the Committee of Sanitation and Solid Waste. I am Catherine Garcia, Commissioner for the New York City Department of Sanitation. With me here today, as you said, is First Deputy Commissioner Stephen Costas and Edward Grayson, Director of the Bureau of Cleaning and Collection. While the department understands the intent behind this legislation, the department cannot support any legislation that impacts the cleanliness of our sidewalks and streets. The department believes that cleanliness of the sidewalks and streets is a huge quality of life issue, and we rely on property owners to do their part in helping to keep the city clean. For these reasons, the department opposes intro number 1228. I want everyone to be assured that snow fighting is a core component of the department's mission, and our workforce understands that their performance is critical to keeping this city functioning 24/7. As we approach the official start of the 2019-2020 snow season, I'm confident that the city's workforce can and will respond quickly and effectively to any major snow event. I look forward to your input and suggested comments on our draft snow plans. My staff and I are now happy to answer your questions.
I'm just curious to know why you are contradicting the mayor and telling people to go out when the mayor has told people to stay in.
So, I mean, I don't think that I'm contradicting the mayor.
Of course you are.
I absolutely
If you're telling people
want-
to go out and clean their streets when the mayor has publicly stated on television that they should stay in, elderly people should stay in, and you're telling them they have to go out and clean their streets, you are contradicting the mayor.
So I think that it's very important to have a city that is clean, and I think
And
that...
you prefer cleanliness over safety.
I
That's
think
what you
that-
stated.
I don't...
That's what you stated in your statement.
I think that you're misconstruing what I am saying.
No, I'm not. I
in my
have it
statement.
right here. I could read it again for you.
So what I am saying is that this is a long-held practice that people are required, property owners are required to take care of their property. And so if it's someone who feels that it is unsafe, they certainly like...
So you're saying if it's an 86-year-old woman who lives alone, the mayor has gone on TV and has said that elderly people should stay in their homes, that they should disobey what the mayor has said and go out and sweep their sidewalk.
So...
Is that what you're saying?
I am saying that it is the
That, to me, is what
responsibility
you're
of the
saying.
property owner to have the sidewalks swept.
No, that's what you're
That is
saying,
what I am
Commissioner.
saying. I am saying it's
That's
the
what you're saying.
responsibility of the homeowner to have the sidewalks
I would
swept.
disagree with you. Okay?
Okay.
And I think it's cruel. I really do. And this has happened to this constituent in my district twice. Okay? That you or the people that enforce this law would do that to somebody. And when we tried to implement or to actually use Local Law 59 as a defense, where you have allowed people to use that as defense, they turned around and they said, no, that it's not a good enough defense.
Well, I believe that that was specifically for the Hurricane Sandy buildings.
Right, exactly. So
Right.
so it's okay for that, but it's not okay for this. It's not okay for an elderly person over the age of 65 when the mayor has said, do not go outside. It's too cold to go outside. He's gone on television. He has hosted a news briefing, and you're telling folks they have to still go outside and clean their streets. It's unfair.
They have to make sure that their streets are clean.
And how do they do that?
So if you...
Do they have to go outside to do that?
If they don't know how, if you could actually get someone else to do it for you.
Oh,
if
so you
think
could pay someone else to do it, is that what you're
If you
saying?
are a property owner, it is your responsibility to maintain
And what about
your
if you're a property owner who lives alone and you're 86 years old?
So the same thing I would tell to my nearly 80-year-old mother. You are responsible for maintaining your sidewalks.
You would tell your
and
mother to go out and not listen to what the mayor has said.
I would keeping my mother from doing anything that she doesn't want to do would be nearly impossible for me. But
Well, it's not a joke.
no,
It's
but
not.
I would say that if she did not feel she could do it, then she
Mm-hmm.
would need to either hire someone or ask someone to assist her.
Well, I'm very surprised at your response here. I really am. And I think it's very unfair. And I look forward to passing this legislation.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, lot of machines, a lot of apparatus that we have. How many in the borough of Queens?
The salt spreading number for this is our de-icing, the big spreaders. That number is 250. Plow number 542.
So, I mean, how are we on like some of the smaller apparatus as well to be able to get down some of the narrow streets or
The holsters, you have 58.
58? All right, definitely. I look forward to, I'm going to reach out to your office and just double check with you.
How many violations were issued last year during declared emergencies and severe weather conditions?
I don't have that data. I can get you that data, and you'll have to actually help me a little bit because are we talking about any time there was high or low temperatures as well?
Yeah, that would be
Okay.
helpful if you could give me that also.
Okay.
And do you know if any of the violations were issued to seniors or
We
people
wouldn't
with
have that.
disabilities?
We wouldn't have that information.
It's
We're
done
ju-
by
we're just-
address?
We're just issuing to a property.
Through property address, okay. All right, that's it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. And I guess the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
I'm Councilmember Idanis Rodriguez, the Chair of the Committee on Transportation. Today, we are also joined by the Committee on Public Safety, chaired by good friend, Councilmember Donovan Richard. We are also considering 5 bills today. The first bill is Intro 769, sponsored by Councilmember Menchaca. The bill will allow bicyclists who receive violation for missing equipment such as bells or reflectors to fix the issue within 48 hours and have the tickets dismissed. The second bill, Intro 1354, sponsored by Councilmember Holding, will require concrete mixing trucks to be equipped shot shutters or similar device to prevent the spillage of concrete or its components. Its component concrete spillage damage our street, and while for some it may seem like a minor inconvenience, for cyclists it can easily result in a crash, serious injury, or worse. We are also hearing a bill that I introduced by request of the mayor. This bill, Intro 1435, would supplement state law by requiring vehicle passengers 16 or older to wear seat belts in the back seat of private vehicles and vehicles licensed by the Taxi and Limousine Commission. The passenger and driver of a private vehicle will receive a $50 fine if the back seat passenger wasn't wearing a seat belt. And for TLC vehicles, only the passenger, not the driver, will receive the penalty. Finally, we are hearing two bills that I introduced. The first, Intro 1763, will clarify the law around drivers passing cyclists. Currently, a state law says that drivers cannot pass a cyclist unless the driver can do so at safe distance. This bill would clarify that in New York City, where of course space is more of a premium than the rest of the state, the minimum safe distance would be 3 feet. This bill would bring the city's standards in line with a majority of the state nationwide. It is critically important that drivers give cyclists enough space for the cyclists to be safe and to feel safe. The second bill I have introduced for today's hearing is a pre-considered introduction in relation to safeguards. This bill would add to previous legislation passed by this committee and the council by expanding the city's requirements for side guards.
In the wake of cyclists being killed, police officers being sent out to the very same intersections and issuing tickets to cyclists. Sometimes it got so bad they would issue tickets for things that aren't even illegal, like not wearing a helmet. We need to understand why that was happening in the first place, because it feels a lot like victim blaming. I appreciate that Chief Monahan has publicly stated that it was insensitive and it won't happen anymore. But I still need to know a few things. Why was that happening to begin with? Who approved those tactics?
Hello, my name's Amanda Hannah McClear. On June 7th of 1994, my grandmother, Donna Blanchard, and my 4-year-old aunt, Michelle Blanchard, were killed in a hit and run. They were pedestrians. They were just going to get breakfast. The driver was never found. My dad still struggles every day to get out of bed because on that day in June, he was shaken awake by his friend and told that his mother and sister weren't coming home. And like I said, to this day, has a hard time getting up. And now, 25 years later, I also awoke to horrible news. I was at my partner's house, and we were celebrating Eid with his family. We watched some home videos, and I fell into a midday nap. And when I woke up, I was tentatively approached by my partner, and he told me that Jose Alzariz, my mother's partner, had died. It was surely a nightmare that I thought I was going to wake up from, but I never did. I have to stress that we never worried about Jose cycling in the city because he took all of the necessary precautions. He was the safest cyclist you would ever meet. He found out that my mom and I weren't wearing helmets and immediately went out and bought us helmets. I've been cycling on the street since I was 14 without a helmet, and we just never did it. But he made sure we got them. And on August 11th of this past year, he had a helmet. He was waiting patiently for the light, but a reckless driver was going 60 miles per hour in a 25-mile-per-hour zone. So when the driver blew past that red light, a solid red, on Coney Island Avenue, and he hit another car, that car went flying and killed Jose. If Jose wasn't following the rules of the road, he might have survived, but this can't be a city in which following the rules of the road gets you killed. I feel that we're a city that is playing catch-up. We're playing catch-up when it comes to pedestrian and cyclist safety. London implemented side guards 5 years ago. Where were we? We're supposed to be a leading metropolitan city. Cities like London, Paris, Oslo are blowing right past us. And I heard a lot about community engagement, and while that's important, the mayor of Oslo didn't second guess that she needed to shut down streets for pedestrian and cyclist safety. She just did it. There was pushback from businesses, and she still did it anyway. And things are much safer there, and people are happier, and businesses did not suffer because of it. We should be talking about the implementation of a comprehensive network of 100% protected bike lanes. These bills should have been passed years ago. Like I said, London had passed it already. So yes, please pass these bills because they're past due, but we have so much more work to do. 5 years ago, they isolated Coney Island Avenue as a dangerous intersection, particularly where Jose was killed, and nothing was done about it, and we lost Jose. There should have been a protected bike lane there. And in the case of my grandmother and my aunt, it took about 20 years until they narrowed the street because the boulevard was too wide. They knew that back then. It took them 20 years to do it. We don't have time anymore. The only thing that keeps me coming up here and sharing this story is that Jose truly would have wanted me to, because he followed crashes very closely in the city, and they made him extremely angry. Just 12 days before he was killed, he shared an article with my mom about M. Smolovich, the 30-year-old cyclist who was killed on 36th and 3rd in Sunset Park on July 29th. The crash happened right outside of my mom's office, and Jose was nervous about her riding her electric scooter from their home in Park Slope to Industry City. There's no questioning what he would have said if he was here with us today. The green wave doesn't go far enough. And I don't want to hear things like we heard just now about being realistic. It's not what I want to hear from a city that's home to gleaming skyscrapers that were deemed unrealistic and unimaginable years before. We have so much potential. We failed Jose because he was vigilant and informed, and he was still killed. And if anyone's thinking that Jose should have known better than to cycle on these streets, I ask you to question where that bias is coming from, because it's stifling. Are we supposed to sit home on a beautiful Sunday? Are we not allowed to bike back home? Are we not allowed to go for a swim? That's all that Jose was trying to do on August 11th. And people say this isn't a cyclist city, but I beg to differ. There are cyclists here. That makes it a cyclist city. And I just have to say that Jose didn't drive. He didn't have a license because he was too terrified at the sheer idea of hurting someone or the potential to hurt someone, so he just didn't drive. And frankly, the bills on the table wouldn't have saved Jose, and that's hard to contend with, but they might have saved M. Smolovich, and they will absolutely save someone who is walking among us right now. There's an innocent person out on the street whose life depends on our actions here. And I hate to think that 6 more cyclists have been killed since Jose died. It's so alarming and frightening. My family is frozen in August, and as our grief thaws, the city around us is bewildering. This is a city without Jose, and that just doesn't make any sense. It is confusing to me to see New Yorkers huddled under their jackets, to see Halloween decorations adorning homes and storefronts, because in our minds, the trauma of August is still so fresh. And if it was fall, Jose would be cooking us a warm meal, probably a recipe he found in the New York Times, which he loved to read. If it was fall, he would be asking us to take a tour of Greenwood Cemetery with him, which was one of his favorite places in the city. But he's not here. And I have a mom that's struggling to make sense of losing her partner that she thought she would have for another 30 years. And I share these personal details because I don't know how else to elicit empathy. And that's empathy, not sympathy, because sympathy is well-meaning cards and empty promises. Empathy is action, and we're going to need a lot more of it if we're going to save lives. There are no strangers here. My suffering, my family's suffering, is also everyone's suffering in the room. and it should compel us all to make changes in the city, and quickly. And for our NYPD, who's no longer here, which I wish they were, I'm a granddaughter and a niece of 2 retired officers, meaning I'm their niece, I'm their granddaughter, and I'm skateboarding, cycling on these streets. I have been since I was 14 years old. Once these bills are passed, and this is a direct message to them, I need you to enforce them. When you see a cyclist on the street, any cyclist on the street, that's me, and you can't let this happen to my family a 3rd time. We can't lose a third, another person. And I just want them to know that I follow the rules of the road. I don't speed, and I'm not reckless, and neither was Jose. And I believe these were passed out, but there are photos of us that I would just love you to look at, because he was a very real person. This is not an abstraction in numbers.
Just want to say so sorry for your loss, and thank you for coming here. I know it's not easy sitting there, but I want you to know that we appreciate you coming down to testify today. And we're going to continue to do everything we can do in our power to make sure that, although they are gone, that their legacies live on. And you're totally correct. It's not just about sympathy, it's about empathy and action. And that's why we're here today. So we're hoping these small steps can be helpful in ensuring that we never have to sit here again. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lauren Pine, and I'm here today with Families for Safe Streets. Less than 2 years ago, I was crossing with the light with my bicycle when I was struck and dragged by a 10-wheel Mack truck who was making a right turn. Fortunately, bystanders were able to stop the vehicle. The driver did not even see me. I was awake the entire time. My left leg was pinned under the driver's side tire. I was rushed to Bellevue Hospital, where they saved my life and performed a rare amputation called a hip disarticulation that they only do when there's no other option due to the poor prognosis. My pelvis was fractured, and due to infection, they couldn't repair it from the inside, so it is healed crooked, making sitting painful. My bladder was also badly damaged, requiring me to be near a bathroom at all times now and to wear pads. The skin on my right leg was torn off on almost the entire upper thigh. I underwent extensive skin grafting from my back, and I stayed in the ICU for 2 months. I live alone, and even with good insurance, did not have enough home care. My family had to come from the West Coast, risking their jobs to care for me during the first year. I underwent extensive inpatient and outpatient rehab, and I still have nerve damage in my right leg. My prosthetic leg weighs 17 pounds and costs $100,000. It is not covered by Medicare, which I will go on in a month. Disability is not a living wage. Accessoride is torture. By contrast, trucks privately owned like the one that struck me can carry as little as $1 million insurance. That's before medical and legal costs. This is for a truck capable of causing major damage very easily. The driver who struck me was driving with a suspended license. Crashes with resulting tragedies like this are preventable. The silver lining is that even if I cannot return to my former career as a nurse caring for patients in a cancer hospital, I can use my voice to support things like the initiative for sideguards on large vehicles to protect cyclists and pedestrians. I hope you will all use your power to make this simple, life-saving solution a reality. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I mean, there are no words. But thank you.
We are committed to do whatever we have to do in the city to improve the safety of pedestrians and cyclists, but, let's get a time to talk.
Thank you. We
Thank you.
appreciate that.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Mike. And with that, this hearing is adjourned.